And this election cycle, Ryan, we've had the opportunity to interview a bunch of great guests, and here is another great one for you right now. We have Robert Costa, who is a national political reporter for the Washington Post, on the hotline right now. Robert, how are you today?
It's great to join you. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know we reached out to you during the DNC week, but that had to be probably one of the most hectic weeks, that and the RNC, for this campaign cycle, was it not for you?
It was chaotic. I was working 20 hours a day, and for the rest of the 4 hours, I was either sleeping or looking for a Geno's cheesesteak.
And I know you're from the Philadelphia area. When I looked on your bio, it said you went to Pennsbury High School, so you must be from Bucks County then?
Bucks County, north of Philadelphia, Pennsbury High School, class of 2004.
There we go. I'm from far northeast Philly. I went to Ryan, so we're not too far. Similar neck of the woods, about a 20-minute drive from where I'm at. But nonetheless, so you're obviously very familiar with the area. And one thing that's been very evident in the battleground state of Pennsylvania is that both candidates are making appearances in the area. Secretary Hillary Clinton was at Temple University yesterday. Myself and Ryan were there to cover it. A speech mainly revolved around millennials. And we know Donald Trump is to be in Chester County, I believe, on
Delaware County.
Sorry, Delaware County Thursday night for another address. So we've seen a lot of attention in this Philadelphia area. And Robert, you've been a lot of Trump's events. So we obviously know Trump's not going to win the city of Philadelphia, but he's going to target the surrounding counties. What do you think he's done right so far in those areas, and what do you think he needs to improve on?
It's a great question. It's probably the crucial question for the Pennsylvania contest because, as we all know, Secretary Clinton needs to run up the score in Philly, and that's why you see her going to places like Temple. She just can't count on replicating President Obama's the dominance of the African-American vote in Philadelphia. She needs to get millennials excited. She's been struggling with millennials nationwide. Pennsylvania is a place where she could use some real turnout there. And Trump's got great turnout in the center of the state. They call it the T, and he's doing pretty well in the western part of the state. I've been to some of his events there. It's the collar counties, it's Bucks and Chester and Montgomery and these other counties that are really up for grabs, and these are counties that went for, in a lot of places in Philly suburbs, for George W. Bush in 2004, and so the Trump people think if you look at that as a model, maybe Trump has a good shot because national security can help you win over those moderate voters, even if they're more leaning towards Democrats on the social issues. And the other thing they hope is in Trump's favor is because he's not really seen as a social conservative warrior. He's not really putting an emphasis on abortion and gay marriage and the kind of things like a Rick Santorum would. Maybe he's an easier vote if you're moderate in the suburbs, but they still got those temperamental questions hanging over Trump about whether he's too tough, too harsh in some respects.
And you talk about the neighboring counties really being the most pivotal ones in this election. And you talked about him maybe trying to win those counties in which that George W. Bush had success in 2004. But the last time a Republican major nominee won the state of Pennsylvania was 1988, correct?
It's true. No one's won it since George H.W. Bush in 88.
Exactly. So he needs to do more than W did in 2004 there. Obviously, his message is much different from Republican candidates we've pretty much ever seen. But nonetheless, he's going to be speaking in the Philadelphia area once again Thursday night. What do we expect from that speech?
I think what we can see from him in Chester is a Donald Trump who is doubling down, who is not walking away from his conservative positions, because the usual political playbook in a situation like this is you moderate your message, you become a little more centrist, so you win over the suburban voters, whether it's in Philly or North Carolina or Ohio. But we're not seeing Trump do that. What we're seeing from Trump is a real push to just be himself, to be the conservative populist, the nationalist, and to talk about profiling Muslims and having stricter immigration laws. Trump thinks in this kind of environment, I was just on the plane with him the other day, in this kind of environment, his message, maybe it's a little hardline for some, but it's the kind of message that people think is a true contrast with Secretary Clinton and kind of nothing close to the more soft approach she takes in how she approaches issues. And not so much soft in terms of the policy, but just in terms of the rhetoric that's used.
We're talking to Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post. Robert, Ryan Frascella here. I want to talk to you. You mentioned the concept of profiling Muslims. Before I left the house this morning, I had CNN on, and they were talking about that concept exactly, that many areas that there are already kind of practices in place that one might consider profiling, but a lot of the times you don't hear about it because a lot of the times profiling, when people talk about it, ends up being unconstitutional. Talk a little bit about more what Trump wants to do, and if that would fall into the profiling that, could actually help and wouldn't be, kind of more hurtful.
Well, Trump's been somewhat vague in exactly what it would mean in terms of legal and legislative activity, what he would like to do as president. But it's clear he would profile Muslims. He's talked about a temporary ban of Muslims into the United States. He's transferred that then to a geographic block. So if you're from certain countries that harbor terror, have a history of terrorism, maybe you can't come in. But he has gone there in terms of really calling out the Muslim faith as something that needs greater scrutiny. He uses the phrase, as we all know, there's something going on. And so he does not shy away, sometimes to the chagrin of people in his own party, from really highlighting the Muslim faith as something that he thinks needs to have, whether it's profiling for those who profess that faith or blocking of those who have that faith from coming into the country. He's advocated those positions.
Is that unconstitutional, though, what Donald Trump wants to get passed?
We'll have to see, because if Trump is elected, there's going to be a real tension between what's constitutional, what's going to be challenged in the courts, whether it's the wall, whether it's Congress trying to stop Trump's agenda, and what Trump can do with executive orders. And it's really difficult to see how it's exactly going to play out, because we've seen President Obama use executive power and executive orders throughout his presidency. The role of the presidency in the United States is growing, but the courts, of course, may have a challenge, especially if it comes to some kind of issue of profiling, and it's seen as an infringement on the rights in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution, and especially with free speech.
I think it's safe to say the first big issue that really got Donald Trump on the big national stage and started to distance himself from the other Republican challengers back dating to last summer, as a matter of fact, was that wall. And it's been a rallying point. I'm sure you've seen it time and time again at every rally, how the wall is going to be paid by Mexico. It's going to be 10 feet higher every time he speaks. But my question is, we've seen his rhetoric for the most part has been steady that you need to deport those who are here illegally and build a wall. But then we saw a bit of softening of his stance, saying we have to get, quote, the bad ones out, the ones who are breaking the law. So it kind of, caused a stir, because that was kind of that was the stance that a Marco Rubio and a Jeb Bush had, as opposed to deporting 11 million illegal immigrants. So do you think Donald Trump has softened his stance on illegal immigration from Mexico, or is he back to what he was saying? Because I know Morning Joe made a point to take attack at him after he stated that, calling him Amnesty Don. So, I mean, we've seen that Trump ran on that he was going to deport 11 million illegal immigrants, and then in the past month or so, he's kind of softening that tone. What do you think he's going to say in the debates?
I think he's going to not be Amnesty Don. I think if you were looking at Trump's speeches for the past few days and weeks, even though he's taken on some different positions in the sense that he's walked away from some of his hardline positions, when you look at the speech post-Mexico visit, when you look at his speech today in North Carolina, this is Trump who's still in the Jeff Sessions wing of the Republican Party, referencing the Alabama senator who's a real conservative on this front. Trump's following in that path. He is backing away from this issue that's animated his whole campaign, that's really made him who Donald Trump is politically.
And Robert, we've seen there was a new NBC News poll out today that I believe has, when you factor in all four candidates, Trump down some 5 or 6 points.
5%, yeah.
And, something that I actually read this weekend, I believe it was in the Washington Post, is they were making the comparison between the amount of position papers that each candidate had on their website. Hillary Clinton has some like 25, and Donald Trump has about 9. Do you think that that'll end up hurting him down the stretch with 52 days left, or do you think his supporters, don't really care about, what they see on TV and what the media is talking about, but they've seen 2 points maybe that they...
It's a great question, and it's one that's really hovered over this entire election, because in a traditional campaign, I think there would be an argument that not having position papers, not releasing your tax return, not releasing your full medical record would be a real blemish on your candidacy, that it would put you at risk of seeming to not provide full information to voters, especially if you're a political outsider. In every other campaign, there's not a rule about this, but there's a tradition of revealing more information. With Trump, whether it's his policy papers or his tax return. He has shown a reluctance to go into great detail, and it's been partly to his benefit because he could be whoever wants to be to different groups. He's running really on this broadly nationalistic populism. It's not really even right or left in terms of ideology. It's nationalistic, it's patriotic, it's for the people without really identifying strongly with the Republican Party. That's why a lot of Democrats seem to be interested in possibly voting for Trump if they're muted about their support for Secretary Clinton. So the policy papers for Trump, in any other campaign, it would hurt him, but it doesn't seem to hurt him. We'll have to see if swing voters really care. But the thing Trump has been strong on, even though he doesn't have details on his policies, it's pretty clear what Trump's running on. I mean, he's running on to renegotiate trade deals, to put up a wall, to curb immigration, and to try to revitalize the economy. Anyone who follows his campaign in even a small way, you kind of get what Trump's running on. With Secretary Clinton, it's more of a nuanced argument about temperament, about experience, about kind of a moderate liberal leadership style.
You mentioned that moderate liberal leadership style, and some people that I've been talking to, they've almost classified this election and said that if Hillary Clinton were running in any other election, she would be considered a moderate Republican. What do you make of that statement?
Well, we've seen some Republicans drift over to Clinton, especially this week with former President George H.W. Bush telling a member of the Kennedy family that he's going to vote for Clinton. And I think because the biggest thing is foreign policy. Look at Clinton's vote for the Iraq War when she was in the Senate. Look at the way she handled her job as Secretary of State. This is a person who, even though she's a Democrat and has been a Democrat her whole life, she has a hawkish instinct on foreign policy. She's okay with intervention. She thinks the U.S. should have a strong role in the world. And that really puts her at odds in a way with Trump, who has, I wouldn't say an isolationist impulse, but he has an aversion to sending troops abroad, even though he's very militaristic in his language. So we have this Trump persona who's not really out of the hawk school, which has dominated the GOP for so long, particularly with President George W. Bush.
Joining us on WHIP radio right now is Robert Costa, who is a national political reporter for the Washington Post. Nice enough to give us a few minutes here on Rational Radio. And Robert, we talked about his foreign policy and how Hillary Clinton, to a certain degree, especially to those on the left, has come off hawkish. But in that interview in, what was it, 2002 or 2003 on Howard Stern, Donald Trump being asked about the Iraq War, saying if he was for it, saying, yeah, I guess so. And we saw in the first Commander-in-Chief forum when Matt Lauer asked Donald Trump his position on Iraq, he said he was against it from the beginning. Do you think Trump hasn't really been challenged on his stance on the Iraq War?
So on the factual side of this, Trump did support the Iraq War, as we've seen through this evidence of different interviews from that time. What makes Trump interesting is that though he did support the Iraq War, and it's well documented about what he has said, his support for the war, if you compare it to other Republicans at the time, was somewhat different. It was not in a very vocal way for the Iraq War. He seemed to have some reservations, even though he supported it. And then, of course, eventually he turned on the war a couple of years later, pretty soon after the war started, compared to most Republicans in the Bush wing who stuck with the war for years. And so you see in Trump someone who went along with it, wasn't really a political figure, but he went along with it. And he didn't seem to really love the idea. And so that's who, I think that's kind of who Trump is. He's okay with war. He's not against war. He's on the dove. But he's not a George W. Bush Republican.
We are just 6 days away from the first presidential debate, and obviously they have two completely different style of campaigning and debating as well. How is Donald Trump prepped for this first debate? Because we know there's been a lot of chatter about that.
Trump spends a lot of time when he's off the campaign trail in Bedminster, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. He's got a golf club. And that's where he gathers his aides, his family, his advisors, his friends like Rudy Giuliani and New Jersey Governor Christie. And they get together on Sundays, off the record, no cameras, no press, and they get ready for the debate. And one person who's there kind of playing the Clinton role, but not formally doing so, is Laura Ingraham, the radio show host. And so they're all sitting around with hamburgers and hot dogs and some ice cream and soda. Trump doesn't drink alcohol. And they're
I know he said he eats McDonald's. I know.
He eats McDonald's. That's for sure. He loves McDonald's. Loves the quarter pounders with cheese.
That's gross.
Now, you know why he likes fast food is he thinks it's reliable. He travels all around the country. He doesn't want to take a gamble on local food too often. He went to a barbecue place in North Carolina today. But with fast food, Trump speak about this. He thinks if you go to McDonald's, you know what you're getting. And it's funny to think about his love for fast food. He just released his health letter from his doctor last week saying he was a little overweight, even though he's, quote, in excellent health. But Trump, he's been eating cheeseburgers at his golf club. That's pretty much his debate prep, talking with his friends and advisors.
How much do you, so obviously leading into the debate, right now it's neck and neck in a lot of these battleground states. We've seen various polls in Ohio where Trump has a minimal lead, Pennsylvania, Clinton with a small lead, and I've seen several different polls where in Florida where it's been back and forth with both of them. So after the first debate, we're expecting to see some change in the polls. What do you think we're going to see after the first debate?
It's hard to say. I think this first debate, though, is so pivotal. Whatever happens in Hofstra next week, it's going to really determine the turn of the campaign. If Clinton is steady and strong and seems really appealing to a wide range of voters, she'll come out of there like a rocket. If Trump makes her seem unsteady or she doesn't seem well and he seems vigorous, remember this with the 60 campaign, even though Nixon won on radio, Kennedy won on TV. We live in a TV age. It's not just about winning on points and about what you say. So if Trump seems to be the bigger personality, can seem presidential, that's just really important for Trump. And it may not just be the answers he gives on policy and beating Clinton point to point. It's, can he seem presidential? Can this celebrity billionaire really fill the suit? Can he convince the country that he's ready for the White House? Because when you meet a lot of voters around the country, I'm sure it's maybe like this for you guys in Philly, there's an appetite for change, not necessarily for Trump, but for some kind of change, something different from the political establishment. So Trump has a lot of things in his favor, I think, in this climate, but he has to rise to the occasion.
And Robert, we saw that kind of appetite for change at the Hillary Clinton rally. It was evident. People were cheering loudly. It's the first one that I've been in attendance at. And we've really seen Clinton and the Democrats go after this voter mobilization, and even both sides to a degree, getting people out to vote. And we saw President Obama even speaking to the Congressional Caucus saying he'll consider it a personal insult if that community doesn't turn out and vote for Hillary Clinton. One of the most passionate times that I've ever seen him speaking. What are your thoughts on that event and how that could possibly impact voters going to select the choice for Secretary Clinton as opposed to Donald Trump?
You're right. I think that Congressional Black Caucus reception speech by the president is going to be remembered, and for the reasons you cited, because this election is no longer an inside joke for a lot of Democrats. You talk to Democrats here in Washington, there's nerves. They're skittish. They look at the polls, they say it's way too tight. Clinton spent millions on TV. She hasn't gotten a ton of distance between her and Trump in the polls. The Democratic insiders I'm talking to, they're saying, whoa, what's going on here? Because if we don't start getting that Obama base out, especially the African-American base, some of these urban areas like Cleveland and Philadelphia, different parts of North Carolina, in Florida, then you may have a big problem for Secretary Clinton. And Trump could actually slip through for the reasons I was talking about, this mood for change, this wave of change. And so you see Obama, who's been so dismissive of Trump for so long, now he has an urgency to his voice. He's saying, I've been president for nearly 8 years. My whole legacy is on the line. Because if Trump wins, first day he goes in there and unwinds every single executive order Obama's done, begins to unravel Obamacare. This is real stuff. This is high stakes.
Last question here for Robert Costa of the Washington Post. He's a national political reporter covering a lot of Donald Trump's campaign. Robert, I really liked your article. I believe it was in August about Trumpism, about how this is, although if he loses, will part of the Republican Party start to model himself after his campaign? Please tell our listeners about that article and what you think the Republican Party's future is, even if Trump loses.
That's the key question for the GOP, especially if Trump loses. Does this populism that's become really taking a grip over the GOP for the last year with Trump, does it continue? Can the ideas that Trump's talking about on trade, on immigration, and the way he thinks about the economy, not in a traditional tax cut Republican way, in more of a growth populist way, there's aversion to entitlement reform. Trump's actually for entitlement spending. He advocates child care entitlement increase in spending like he did last week. We see Trump not talking about cutting Social Security, Medicare like Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney did in 2012. I think the future of the GOP, if Trump wins, will move in the Trump direction because the presidency so deeply influences his party. But if Trump loses, I think you're going to see this working class element of Trump's platform still have a place in the Republican Party, and the Paul Ryans and Mitch McConnells of the world will find it difficult to bring the world order in their party back to what it was, because Trump, for all of his controversy and his unpredictability, he has been a political leader in a transformational way, and I think he rose not so much just because of Obama and anti-Obama and anti-Clinton, but out of the rubble of George W. Bush's presidency, of all this anger about the Republican establishment. It became the Tea Party movement for a time, and then Donald Trump comes in and just starts to kind of rewrite the whole Republican ideological playbook. And I think that battle will continue. The battle for the future of the GOP will continue if he loses, but he won't. He may fade away. He may go do a TV show, but his politics, his ideas, I think, will stay around for a while.
Less than 2 months away from Election Day, decision 2016. Stays away from the first debate and all the coverage you can read from Robert Costa from the Washington Post. He's a national political reporter. Awesome stuff, Robert. Hope to have you again on soon.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Robert.